2015 Chrysler 300 with the V6. Let's hear what it sounds like. I don't have a lot of history on this car. Customer just bought it from auction like this. He suspected there was camshaft issues, timing chain issues, so he did all new spark plugs, all 4 camshafts, timing chain, tensioners, and gaskets. Still making the same noise, still misfiring. Decided it's time to do an engine. So we went over to the local salvage yard, got a 2015 Charger V6. It's in really good condition. And look at this, even the tensioner and the idler, nothing's making noise. No oil leaks, no coolant leaks. Hopefully this one won't have lower end noise either. To make sure compression's good on this, we don't have a starter motor. We're going to use a leak down tester and test each cylinder at top dead center. The firing order on this engine is passenger side front bank, cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cylinder 1 already, about 9% leakage at 99 psi. Cylinder 2, also really good. And cylinders 3, 4, 5, 6 all came out with about 5 to 10% leakage. I say that's good, let's put it in. I'm gonna do something a little unconventional. Most of you are familiar with pulling the hood and pulling the engine out the top, fighting with it over the radiator support and everything. I'm going to pull everything out the bottom. So pull the upper intake manifold, that gives us access to more hoses and wiring. Pull the PCM connector that goes to the engine. The other PCM connector goes to the dash, that one can stay in. And then a bulkhead connector and the battery lead, that is down in the fender. And then we can move to the other side of the engine. Over on this side, we pulled coolant recovery, bottle hose, heater hose. All those hoses disconnect from the engine. AC lines, there's 2 of them need to come off. Make sure that's recovered properly. You got intake breather hose and brake vacuum hose, PCV, and that's it for that side. Okay, the engine and the transmission are going to come out the bottom together. They're going to sit on this subframe here. We'll pull them down with a bunch of stuff attached. That's going to be the steering rack, the Y pipe for the catalytic converters. We disconnect those here. We're going to pull the transmission cross member, and then we'll disconnect all of the steering on the outside and leave the rack mounted in. The steering rack has a harness that connects up in this front corner, and then we can drop everything down. A quick clarification, your subframe bolts right by your control arms in the front. It's also where your power steering connectors are at. And then your rear subframe bolts are right above the sway bar. To disconnect the mufflers, I put a ratchet strap on the muffler. Call me backyard mechanic. Pull them apart till they're separate. Drive shafts loose so that when the trans comes out, we can disconnect that later. Transmission shifter is disconnected, and the steering column, marked it in red where it lines up. Disconnected it from the dash and scooted it up. Good to go. Okay, at this point I've got the strut disconnected from the lower control arm, the sway bar link disconnected, the ABS sensor and the brake hose disconnected from the knuckle, calipers up on its own hook, and the upper ball joints disconnected. That totally separates the whole lower subframe suspension parts from the body. Going up. Double checking the hoses to get out of the way. Pulling the drive shaft away from the transmission. And setting the trans cooler lines away from the engine. Check everything one more time to make sure nothing breaks as it's going up. all the room in the world to access every bolt and separate this motor. I don't have to fight with anything in the car. First up, we take the belts and the hoses off. Now grab a pick and start pulling that wire harness off. Some of the wire harness is going to stay on the transmission, so once everything's disconnected from the motor, it just lays on top of the transmission out of your way. Pull the alternator off of the passenger side, that way you can access more of these wires on that side. Four bolts on each side to get the exhaust off of the heads. It's a good idea to support that tail end of the Y pipe. I forgot to do that here. Now we can access the starter heat shield and the wires underneath the heat shield. And then we'll move over to the AC compressor. You do have to pull that motor mount heat shield to get that bottom bolt out of the AC compressor. Now we can take 3 bolts out of the starter and then grab a pry bar because the alignment dowel in the starter is pretty tight, and out it goes. There's 6 torque converter bolts, and they're paired up next to each other in 3 locations. And the last part's pulling the bell housing bolts. Once we have the weight of the motor supported, we can take out the motor mount bolts and separate the transmission from the engine. Don't mind the transmission breather hose. We got the new motor sitting in the chassis. Now we got to transfer all the parts from the old one to the new one. Similar procedure here. We're going to take off all these old hoses and the wires that they clipped at the junkyard and throw it all away. This part's not very fun. You gotta hold that torque converter in place while you rotate the flywheel around and align all the bolts. Once it lines up, you can put your 6 bolts back in. Now we can install the starter wiring, and the heat shield. There is a bunch of Christmas tree clips and tower clips that hold the wire harness on the valve covers. You'll probably break a few, so in this case we had a couple of good ones on the junkyard motor. We transferred them over so that the wire all sits where it's supposed to. These off-road jacks are super sweet. They got giant wheels and a ton of lift. course, camera died while we were filming, so the rest of this got done without footage. We put all these spark plugs in, got the coils on, got the wiring on, got all the accessories on, got the belt on. Exhaust is finished up, transmission's all the way mounted. It's time to drop a car. Just like when we were lifting the car up, we're taking our time going down real slow, watching every hose, make sure things line up. Now we check all of the subframe bolt alignment holes and bolt everything in. I got the exhaust and the drive shaft finished. We're going to work on steering column and power steering connectors. Then we'll drop it down to mid-rise and do the steering and suspension. The things we disconnected, they're now back on. Upper ball joint, strut to lower control arm, sway bar link, ABS and brake cables, and the brake caliper. Okay, up on top, we got one red cable that comes out to your fuse block coming from the battery lead. Battery lead, that's going to go down behind the PCM into the fender. I'll show you a video of that in a minute. There are two ground straps. These need to bolt together right up in this corner. And then PCM connector, bulkhead connector, and then this is your evap purge valve that goes to the intake and the connector that goes to it. Okay, that battery lead cable, it's going to go under your purge valve, drops down into this valley where the PCM lives. That's it at the bottom with the grommet. And then with the fender liner forward, it's got one Christmas tree clip, and it bolts onto that stud right there. I'm not going to record me connecting all the radiator hoses and heater hoses because no one's going to watch it, but definitely go get yourself some of these. They're pretty cheap on Amazon. Remote hose clamp pliers. You grab onto any hose clamp, release it, set it in place. Speed course and overview on this upper intake manifold. 3 electrical connectors, map sensor, throttle body, and then there's one right here for your intake air temp. You got PCV hose, brake vacuum hose, and your purge valve hose. There's 2 nuts that are on an angled bracket, and then the bracket actually helps if you loosen it from the 13mm down below. And then on the other side are 2 brackets, one here and the other hiding down there. Also, if you can get a ratchet down there, try to loosen those brackets as well. And then the 7 bolts down the center that hold it onto the lower intake. It runs! Alright, that was my bad. I forgot to finish filming that one. But I took it on a couple test drives and customer came and picked it up. He was very happy. He left a 5-star review and he's going to be bringing them to work in the future. We all love this. So, I enjoy doing these subframe drops. I'm going to be doing 2 more this month and this is one of them. We're going to be doing a transmission and some engine repairs. It's kind of a big jumble. So like and comment, let me know what you want to see more of, what you don't like, and we can make it more tailored to you. So thanks and good luck in your wrenching.